time, and let's basically talk about a subject that's very relevant to what I'm trying to do. So as I was introduced, the current challenge I'm facing right now is a little bit different versus what others or what I used to do in the past, which is how do we create relevancy, critical mass in this region, enough to retain our talent and add high impact to our overall economies in the region itself. So within that scope, within that concept, I'm trying to answer this question for myself, but also I'm trying to answer that question for Jordan and for the region itself. So how does an entity become relevant in the current environment that we exist in, which is quite challenging when you talk about the Middle East and North African market. So we'll take you through a little bit of opportunities rather than challenges, and how we can potentially spin them to our favor. So the first element I'll start with is an interesting statement that I read recently, which is compared to the Valley, which just before half an hour ago, there was a lot of a major invitation for people to move to the US. But even in a place like Japan, this is an interesting starting point, which is a quarter century behind the Valley is the opinion of the largest VC, oldest VC since the 1970s in Japan in terms of opinion about the Japanese innovation and startups and entities being created in Japan itself. This is from someone who's managing roughly between a couple of, a 513 billion total portfolio of investments that they've done since the 1970s. But he highlighted a couple of interesting points. The first point that he found to be still a challenge for people in Japan is that they don't go global, okay? But global has to be defined. We're going to talk about what is global. Is global the US? Is global Europe? Is global English-speaking nations? Or is global a different spot that we want to find and identify with? But that's a very important area. The other area is that they rush for an IPO, for example. But what I want to highlight again is it highlights another challenge we have in this region when you want to consider going global, is exits. How do you create a structure for an exit market? Having an IPO is something that Japanese companies seem to find easy and they rush into. In this region, in MENA, it's a struggle, okay? So I think these are just two elements that it's not an issue limited to us. It's an issue that even to a very mature economy such as Japan, going global is an underlying question that they keep thinking about. So the first point I want to highlight is just trying to build an argument, actually, and putting a bit of spin around it, is how MENA actually is a beautiful place for going global, okay? Why this region we're in, this very chaotic region we're in, is a great place to thrive and deliver solutions that can really make sense, that are relevant, that can be adopted at a global front, but from the region itself. So the first area that we want to always think about is turmoil, okay? So we are facing a lot of issues in this area. It's clear it's a reason why a lot of VC money doesn't come over as much as we would like it from other markets like Europe and the US. It's clear why a lot of investments are very selective in terms of what they invest in and what they don't. And the news doesn't get brighter, generally. But that's a beautiful opportunity for new innovation to be created. Innovation in such a state of uncertainty is a great platform for great ideas. And that's something that is relevant not only with Middle East and North African markets, like from Morocco to Bahrain, but it's relevant to Sub-Saharan Africa. It's relevant to Central Asia. It's relevant to Far East Asia. And it's relevant to Latin America. There's a lot of commonality for global. So global from this moment onward, for me basically, is anything but Europe and the US. Because we're not relevant if you want to develop solutions that are native to this region. In many aspects, you have to look at the elements that surround you that are not relevant to the US and Europe. They're living in their own environment economically, market-wise, consumer behavior, that we have no relevance to when we talk about our consumer behavior and how we structure things. And you can get that feel when you talk to any FMCG. A strategy for an FMCG in this region is totally different than an FMCG in any other mature market like Europe and the US. So this is a very strong very strong element for growth. But it's also a protective element. And we're going to go quickly through these. One, it's very volatile. It continuously changes. So that allows continuous development in these ideas, continuous migration from version 1.0 to 2.0. You need to be as fluid as the region. And that fluid element is something that really translates itself into a lot of opportunity. Okay? So when we always ask, where are our clients that want to pay so much, you have to look at the region itself and see where are these billions, hundreds of billions of dollars going to. Many of the startups that I've seen across the last 4 or 5 years generally don't address that for some reason. Their focus is always in general elements. You'll find a big chunk of them going into the e-commerce space. The other chunk of them goes into mimicking some sort of solution that they've seen elsewhere. But rarely do you see someone coming and saying, we have the following articulated problem in this region, and I have a solution for it. An example of it is logistics. And as soon as you start to master these things, even someone like Amazon will find it very difficult to enter into this market. Even someone like all those individuals that want to come to MENA will find it very difficult when you're at the grassroots level to compete with people who know to address these issues. Okay? This is our bread and butter. We live here. This is our home. So basically, we're not going to leave this region and area just simply because it's not getting any better. So because of that fact, that plays to my purpose and specific end in mind. Now, the other thing is, or other reason for a lot of innovation, right? We don't have easy access to technology. We always tend to talk to those individuals that are like us. Many of the startups I talk to, very surprisingly, when they're doing the pitch, when they present their design, the first interesting element is it's in English. Rarely do you see someone, for example, from the Arab world, in the initial first design that he presents, places it in Arabic, or in Farsi, or in Urdu in some cases, unless it's really, really niche and unique to that local base of consumers. So we're trying to talk to people like us. And these are a niche in the 300 or 400 or a billion population that we want to communicate with or talk to. They don't speak English, okay? And therefore, we need to talk to them in their own native language. And they don't have a lot of access to technology. And that's quite an interesting element. One of the very uplifting exercises I did, I worked on creating a venture fund with the European Space Agency. What we did is we went and looked at technologies, and it was an exciting experience because what they showed us is that all of the technology owners, over 180 technology owners in Europe were eager, excited to validate for global growth from MENA. They didn't see their solutions as leveraging their capacities using satellite communications or issues that were developed because of the European Space Agency grant model relevant to their European and US markets. They wanted to go to places that lacked access to technology. And that was a turning point in terms of how we are relevant for them to be global. Another area is, I mean, we all struggle with it, but it's also a fact, is we don't have a lot of human experience. And that's an opportunity that differentiates certain countries versus others, but it also allows us the opportunity of doing something from here that is relevant. So relevancy is very important. I'll give you an example. How many have you seen, probably within this campus of 40,000 individuals, within VCs and whatever, someone trying to create a technology that addresses construction? All right, construction. Construction, the biggest construction market today in the world is MENA, for multiple reasons. One, growth verticals, but also because we need to rebuild Syria, we need to rebuild Iraq, we need to rebuild Yemen, we need to rebuild Libya. We are going to be the destination for a lot of issues. We have one of the main drivers of development of security technologies and security companies I had the chance to interface with at different levels, from the East Coast to Tel Aviv, are entities related to resolving our security issues, because we have a security issue. So there's a lot of entities that are basically looking for human expertise to address issues that are coming from and need to be addressed from this area and region. And if you solve a problem in the construction space, one of the first potential investors with you could be architects sitting out in the Bay Area or San Francisco, could be Frog out of Seattle, or could be a multitude of companies that want to solve these problems in areas that generally still use similar stuff. So this is still a problem, but there is funding. We always keep saying for this ecosystem we exist in, because I've been in this ecosystem for probably maybe 4 years, but before that 4 years, in 2009, and I'm Saudi in terms of nationality, but I was the first one who was capable of selling his startup. We didn't use the word startup then. It didn't exist in 2009 very much. But I sold my company for around $20 million, 2009, to an Axiom data company out of Little Rock, Arkansas. Okay? So, but the element of developing the cycle up to that 2009 moment resulted in me funding this business with around 54 million, and roughly 12 million Saudi riyals. Okay? So, sorry, $12 million, 54 million Saudi riyals. So what that told me and gave me exposure to is something I never witnessed when I was in the VC space or at the seed stage early investment cycles we were taking through or going through, is we don't see those investors that are the conglomerates, the family businesses, the owners of wide, high-impact entities that can easily flip a company from loss-making to exponential growth. Take, for example, a Shaya in Kuwait. Shaya in Kuwait is one of the biggest retail owners in the region, franchise-wise, right? Not only in the region, but he's expanded into China, he's expanded to Russia. He owns the franchise world in our part of this corner. From that angle, if a Shaya comes and says, yes, you know what, I like what you're doing for the retail business and I want to adopt it, the exponential impact that he can do is unbelievable. But we don't talk to them. We don't see them in our circles, in this ecosystem in general. So that's an area that we need to try to fix and see how can we bring their investments to be aligned with our investments to take us at the global level of Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, Central Asia, Turkey, and of course, once you go from Iran eastward, there's a lot of opportunity country by country. But then again, from the practical experience, you heard an interesting discussion about the legal aspect of registering in the US. There's a lot of talk about patents, IP, registration, and where should you basically hold that knowledge and know-how. But again, if we basically are transparent with each other, how many of us really are driving patents? How many of these startups and entities are really driving something that can be globally accepted because it's unique? It's totally new. It's not solving a specific logistical issue on an e-commerce site and bringing products to this consumer versus that customer, okay? But it's basically driven by a lot of our R&D. Now, one of the things we always talk about is, do we have R&D in this region, right? But we do. There is R&D, regardless. Here in Turkey, in Istanbul, I went to two or three or four separate institutions that develop R&D. Some of these family conglomerates, for example, were developing new technologies in washing machines that they were patenting and selling into Europe, and no one else can compete with them. They showed us in a very subtle manner, closed, high security, a washing machine that whispers. You don't think that this washing machine is actually functioning, okay? It's just fantastic to see these Turkish engineers developing something that Europe can't even compete with, and they have a major market share in Europe itself. But that translated into more R&D institutions. Even in Jordan, we have a dedicated 50 million Jordanian dinars, okay? To put it in perspective, that's around 70 to 80 million US dollars for R&D projects alone. And there's a lot of R&D going around, but we don't spend time with them. We don't look about how we can potentially commercialize these entities and take them global in general. We just don't. And for some reason, it's because we have a lengthy process that needs a lot of funding and it's complicated. But it does exist. So the question is, if you really want to go global, step back a little bit and ask yourself, are you doing your homework? Are you really different? Can you defend whatever you are protecting from this area and isolated part of this world that we're trying to call home? The other element is a lot of entities, they don't think global when they design their first day of, idea. Either A, you find it sometimes a solution that's very limited to Saudi Arabia. It's just Saudi specific. It gets investments, it gets funding, but it's Saudi specific. No one else in Saudi faces this problem. It's Egyptian specific. It's Turkey specific. It's Pakistan specific. It's Iran specific, okay? It's not something you can take out of these countries and say, you know, the whole Farsi-speaking nations are interested in the solution. All the Arab world is speaking, but even beyond the Arab world, you know, non-Arab speakers want this or not, right? The basic element of this, and you find these arguments coming between the investor and the entrepreneur and the founder, and he's defending his opinion because he says, you know, I think it works. None do a lot of qualified research. You ask them, what's your market structure? They don't know it, okay? I mean, you look at the amount of slide, the assumptions of the business are personalized to the founder and the experience of a couple of individuals around them. There's no way you can go global with that. There's no way. I mean, when I used to work in Procter & Gamble, we had a vicious cycle internally when someone came up with a new brand, and the first question someone like John Pepper would ask in Cincinnati is this a global product? If it's not a global product, kill it. Okay? And things have come out of the Saudi market that were consumed in the Mexican market because it had a global feel. The research was global. So any individual, any startup, any idea that doesn't do sufficient research to address market structure, market assessments, areas that are needs, hierarchy of needs. What's the difference between someone, another similarity? Why did the research here, the consumer behavior, which is astonishing, a mother sitting in Mexico had the same behavioral attributes of a mother sitting in Saudi Arabia. And it is a very interesting coincidence, but that's a fact. So that allowed someone to come in with a very high level of confidence and say, if it succeeds in Saudi, it's going to succeed in Mexico, because research says so, okay? The other element, how many individuals really test their ideas? For a lot of startups, for a lot of you here, when you think about global, you're very limited sometimes to the city level experience, okay? And the critical mass doesn't even exist. From that specific angle, the idea doesn't go through any testing, other than the strategic opportunity of addressing the market potential, but the actual idea, what you're presenting as a solution, you need to ask yourself, is it global? These are, the comments right above are actual research testing tools that people should be engaged with and develop and take it to market. But before you take it to market, ask yourself a couple of questions. Is this beyond my comfort zone? It's beyond Jeddah. I was born in Beirut, I lived in Jeddah, but Jeddah is my comfort zone. So I'll always think that the problems in Jeddah are the problems of the universe, right? But the question really is it really a universal problem? And is how I approached it, is that idea really relevant to take it beyond and take it a couple of steps further? So that's a very important element when we're designing for a global perspective. Just like the first starting slide, from day one, just like we were saying, when you're designing your company from a legal perspective, when you're structuring it legally, create a Delaware entity from day one, if you want to go global. But the same thing applies. If you want to go global, ask yourself, is this really a global product or not? A very interesting element is traction. Now, science or people who want to mitigate risk really leverage science. There's an interesting company called Bases, okay? And Bases, for a lot of FMCG people, is a hated company. No one likes this company, right? Because they come up with the idea, they work with their ad agency, the ad agency tells them this is a great product. They then take it to the research people, just barely got the research guys to get convinced that there is market potential, but they then take it into a volume forecasting tool made out of or done by people that work in statisticians. Mathematical, hardcore, rigid, cold individuals, boring. They have nothing interesting other than testing your fundamental assumptions. And they put that into something called a volume forecasting tool, and they tell you, will you deliver X sales by X day, by X quarter, by X month, by X year? And that's a scary nightmare. And therefore, companies are willing to go and spend $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 to a certain extent in terms of delivering some of these solutions to really validate before they go into $1 million, $2 million, $5 million type of product exercise. So there's a little bit more science, which, yes, I agree, a lot of us in this ecosystem don't like to follow that route. We don't like to be scientifically challenged and being told by someone, you know what, it's not going to work. Just not going to work. There's no way you can move beyond the borders of your town, your village, your country, your region. This is just too specific to you, very specific to you. Now, a very interesting element is your identity. What are you? And when I was running Oasis 500 and talking to a lot of the VCs, and people used to say, you keep investing in e-commerce platforms. It's always e-commerce platforms. Yeah, e-commerce is a new way of trading. Yeah, so there's nothing really novel about it, that's true. It's just basically, can I move this product from here to there and overcome the issues that surround that issue, that challenge in essence. But what are you? Again, the more you are a solution to a universal problem, the more you can become global. The more that you are a platform that has no specific inherent interest that people want. All of a sudden, we all use Twitter. The only reason we care about Twitter not failing is because Twitter now is part of our identity. What are we going to do if Twitter shuts down? The guy selling to someone, what if they shut it down? No more Twitter. Part of the Saudis will go into crisis. The #1 nation that uses Twitter to express itself will probably go into a deep, deep situation of depression because they have now no tools for expression. But the issue is, what are you? Are you just limited within the country? Okay? So if the answer to some of these questions will allow you to identify to what extent can you be global. The other element is cross borders, because we're not the US. The US, the sweet spot about the US, and that's why the EU itself, with all its maturity, cannot compete with the US. There are no borders. There are no real borders. Even if you stop the borders between Germany and France, they still speak German, and they speak French, and the Spanish speak Spanish. So therefore, languages in themselves, the Czech speak, everyone has their own language as a physical border. But in the US, it's one language, it's 300+ million people. You can just spread it if you want to. But the challenges of going there are in themselves difficult. One element that I always used to give advice about is, one of the viral elements that are very unique, very universal, is campuses. Campuses. The majority of our startups don't come from campuses. They don't come from the future crowd. They don't come from the student base. They don't come from the people that really matter. They don't come from the 50. We always throw these numbers. 50% of this population is under the age of 15, okay? And then, 75% of the population is under the age of 35. We're a very young population. Where are you? Well, I'm trying to solve the problem in the neighborhood, and then I'm trying to get traction, and then I'm going on, I'm going to improve my Google search and SEO and all the, whistles and everything and bells, and trying to go and talk to an audience that's right next door. Go to the campus, throw out leaflets. It's much cheaper. If you can get your first 10,000 people to adopt your product, probably there's a lot of viral element that can help campuses reach out to other campuses. We don't do that at all, and these are large populations. That's where the new behavior is going to be created. You look at a country like Saudi Arabia, or I just mentioned earlier on, 40,000 in this campus alone. That's a small village that we don't want to talk to in general. And the ideas are beautiful, they thrive, there's so much support available here. You want someone to help you in finance, you go to the business school. You want to help someone in engineering, you go to the engineering school. You want someone to talk about agriculture, they're right across the street, and you talk to them about how you want to solve your problems. You have the mentor base, you have everything around you, yet you don't want to spend time there. As a startup, as someone who wants to claim, I can go and speak to the youth of the world. And interestingly enough is critical mass. Always, critical mass. This word it killed us when we used to, can you deliver critical mass, right? You have to show for investors, if you are saying, I am a global solution, that you have critical mass. And critical mass comes with numbers. But if you look at those numbers, if you look at some of the startups, when I did a benchmark exercise and study between around 15 to 20 startups in the US and 15 to 20 similar, okay, beta, copycat startups in the region. If you looked at their curve, okay, at the curve that they were asking, the consumer, the consumption, the number of people, the users, and that curve across a 18-month vertical that allowed them to raise the capital that they were raising, okay, the numbers were not like millions. We're not asking you to have millions or tens of millions sometimes. So the number actually is not that steep. It starts with a couple of 10,000 or 20, 40. Show me you can do 100, 200, jump to 1.5 million. If you're now at a 3, 5, 7 million user base, that's interesting. But if you look at the capital flows that follow that trajectory, you get surprised that you don't see the same thing happening in our region. Although people don't try to deliver those numbers by focusing on where you can get the critical mass from. So getting critical mass is an area that you need to think about a great, great deal. So, you want to go global. And I said, let's first define it. And I basically gave that introduction. What do you mean by global? It's very important to define the countries that fall under the word global, the regions that fall under the word global for you as an entity that wants to create something totally new, wants to innovate in a new space, wants to solve a specific problem, and that's a key element for us to define. And the other element that's key, very key, that is universal again, is validation. One of the startups I met in Berkeley was, heads over heels excited that they now had a validation partner in the municipality of Amman, okay? And they knew that if they could convince the municipality of Amman to use this specific technology that they had created, that they can get all other cities in the region to do a similar type of aspect, a similar type of partnership, and again, it can deliver for them that exponential volume growth that they're looking for. So early validation and validation partners are key that can translate you into a global entity. But look, someone in Berkeley was looking at Amman. Maybe you should be sitting here and asking yourself, I'm here in Istanbul or I'm in Amman, but maybe the problem exists somewhere in China. If you attend more and more, there's an interesting organization called Future Cities or Cities of the Future. The majority of participants in this are Chinese mayors. When they attend this, they come and tell you, you know what? I am looking towards you to solve my future problems because all of a sudden I can start from nothing and all of a sudden I'm a 15, 20, 30, 40 million population-based city. All of a sudden. This is a 1.3 billion population just exploding with cities every day, right? So that element is in itself an opportunity. There are searching for solutions across the globe. The other element, again, the lack of the word strategy. Everybody, you're going to find so many individuals responding, I'm a global company, I'm a global idea, I'm a global concept. But when you sit down with them and you ask them a simple question, what's your strategy? What's your strategy? Don't give me the lip service of, yeah, well, this is my strategy and I think I'm going to do it. What is your strategy? How are you going to be a global company? Give it some thought. You can always allocate at least an hour a day to think about your strategy of how you're going to go global. And if you don't have a very good answer to how you are going to go global, then don't say I'm a global company. If you don't have a solid answer that tells you how are you going to go global, then just basically, just dump it. Don't keep making a claim that you have no argument or narrative to support it. And that's a very a lacking component in nearly all the discussions we have with startups and entrepreneurs and founders when we ask them the question, what's your global approach? Okay? Either there isn't, and I'm waiting to be acquired, hopefully by someone coming from the US that wants to expand into MENA. And many of us think in that term. The majority of startups that I have at least interfaced with, okay, always talk about hopefully being acquired by someone else. So the exit market doesn't exist here. Their pitch to the investors is that hopefully I'm going to be acquired by somebody coming into the region, okay? I can't acquire companies myself. I enjoyed a fabulous experience of sitting in the company that I created when I was in Jeddah and trying to acquire for 43 million euros Wegner in Europe. Wegner was the second largest data company in Europe, and I was sitting in Jeddah articulating and working out the deal to acquire them. We got shortlisted once, shortlisted again until ING, the bank which was running the exercise, we were us and a local Dutch company that was making the acquisition. We gave a 43 million euro offer. It was declined because we had an earn-out agreement attached to it. What they agreed with was to take, I think, a 40 or 39 million euro offer, which was less than ours because it was cash on the barrel. So they just took the money and walked away. But that spirit that we from this region can acquire other companies outside this region. And the reason all the CEOs, I had to convince all the CEOs of Wegner from Belgium to France to the UK to Germany They had to be convinced that this Saudi subsidiary, this Saudi startup, really can make a difference for us. And we showed them that we can give them efficiencies, better market access, better potential, better growth, all the elements that really convinced them that this will be a better business for them. So please, define your blue ocean. What are the areas you want to go and invest in and try to make a difference and influence that market? Influence that market by really making a difference, right? Now, very important and key is your financial outlook. What's very important is that you own the process. One of the things we learned from, and I saw a couple of friends doing it, is that they had 3 goals. One, they had a profit goal, they had a sales goal, and profit comes before sales, and they had a valuation goal. And that valuation was when they would need to develop X to hit a specific valuation in their mind that will hopefully be attractive to investors to come in and give them the capital that they wanted. You know, again, those days in 2009, 11, at least within our region, we didn't really hear about these words of Series A and Series B and all the other terminology we generally use. But most challenging for this region to really become global from here is what was easily mentioned in the session before. It's the exit market. We don't have an exit market, okay? When you hit a specific point, let's say, you know, souk.com, who's going to buy souk.com from the region? Okay? Even one of our biggest exits we keep talking about and singing about and dancing around, Maktoob. Who bought Maktoob? It was somebody coming from the US, right? Even my own startup, who bought it for $20 million? It was somebody coming from Arkansas, for all the states in the world. Yeah. But I think the element is we need to build an exit market. The current situation, as it stands today, the fact is we don't have an exit market. So if we don't solve this problem, it is very challenging for you to be global from this region. We have to think of a way and a method, and that's really the challenge of what we're trying to achieve, you know, with this innovation strategy for Jordan is, how do we build an exit market? How do people know that if they put in $100,000 in the angel round, that hopefully they'll get bought out somewhere down the road, 5, 7 years, 10 years, for 10x the value. But if you put $15 million in a Series X, who's going to buy that share out and exit you? We only have, what, a couple of VCs? The total VC money we have in this region probably is not going to hit, if you add up the new Circle 331 coming from Beirut, probably is not going to hit even $1 billion. Series A type of 2 million, 3 million. It will never hit $1 billion. We have so much available to us that we're not even tapping into or accessing. So we have to build an exit market. But how do you do that? You do it yourself, okay? And I'll basically give you an example of building a quick story around that. When I wanted to sell my company, I didn't have an exit market. So I did a couple of steps. One, I flew from Jeddah I remember very well, on Eid Ramadan to New York. Out of the blue, I knocked the door of the chief executive officer of the Direct Marketing Association sitting in New York. And I told him, I'm a Saudi startup sitting in Jeddah. I am in the data space. I'm unique, I'm different. I want to talk to you. He says, why? I want to build the Arab Direct Marketing Association in the region. Okay? Wasn't interested first, found it to be novel, spoke to the chief operation officer first, then got the chance to do that. That was in somewhere towards the end of 2008. In 2008, that meeting translated in us coming just in Hajj, December of 2008, signing and launching the Arab Direct Marketing Association. So my spin on that was I wanted to create my exit market. I want to sell my shares. The second thing is a name you might not know, is a guy called Amr al-Dabbagh. He was the head of the Saudi Arabian General Investment Authority of Saudi Arabia. Great guy, visionary. So I went to him and said, listen, I want to make Saudi Arabia the center of excellence for data in the world. He says, okay, how are you going to do that? I want you to give me 1 million square meters that I can allocate to 20 potential investors who will take 50,000 square meters and build data centers on the west coast of Jeddah, or west coast of the Red Sea. He says, okay, and I'm going to basically bring the first anchor investor. He says, and what do you want from me then? I want from you a letter that I am now the official broker, or whatever you want to call it, who's going to try to sell Saudi Arabia as the center of excellence for data and data management. I took that, and then I worked on an event with the Direct Marketing Association, and we did an event in early April of 2009 now, and in 2009, we had the first Arab Direct Marketing Association mega event happening in Jeddah under the auspices then of Prince Khalid Al Faisal, right? To that event, we wanted to bring in, and the Direct Marketing Association was with us as a partner. And they started to educate their member base of 100,000 plus about the potential of MENA. In that event, some CEOs flew over from the US. But before that, they attended. We had to do a workshop in Naples, Florida, where we went and spoke to around 60 CEOs, each one running a business of around $1 billion. One of them was John Mayer, the CEO of Axiom. We played golf, had dinner, had lunch, flew, sent out some people to Saudi Arabia to listen to what we had to say. Then somewhere in May, I got a call saying, would you fly to Little Rock, Arkansas, and we can have a discussion with you about what you're doing in the region? I flew, lived in an apartment for a month and a half, and walked away with a letter of intent that they will buy my business for $20 million. So that's building your exit market. Now that spirit in itself is something that we have to replicate across multiple entities. And trust me, it might not be the Googles of the world that will buy you. It might be a lot of those entities that exist in the world. If you're looking at an exit coming foreign, who run businesses in the US and Europe of $1 billion to $2 billion plus. They have the cash, the excitement, and the risk appetite to make a quick decision to buy your business. And with that, I appreciate your time.